All right, my loves, let's continue with books with Bowman with today's story, Enemy Pie. Enemy Pie is written by Derek Munson, and he is the author, and the illustrator is Tara Callahan King. This is one of my favorite stories, and I do believe we read this once during the school year, but it's so great that I wanted to do it one more time. And kind of like a reminder as you go into third grade, to remember to keep an open mind when you meet new people and meet new friends, new classmates. And if you're not getting along right at first, kind of wonder why that might be and see if you can do anything to change it. Because we always have choices, don't we? All right, so let's get started with Enemy Pie. And if you hear scratching, that's Finn, because he wants to come out in the room where I am, but I want him to wait a little bit. So if you hear extra noises, it's probably him. Of course, I love this book. It starts off with a baseball scene. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a tree house in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend, Stanley, he was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew a way of getting rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, Dad said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn out scrap piece of paper with faded writing. Could barely see what it said. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, it said. Satisfied. An enemy pie? Whatever do you think that could be? If you don't remember this story, what do you think an enemy pie would be made out of? You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I know I am. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of your enemies. I was intrigued. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things? Disgusting things? Oh, would I put into a pie? Like, I don't know, snakes and snails for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think we'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning. That must be good. He gave it right back to me. I was confused. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was definitely confused by this. Because he's thinking, of course, enemy pie would be something terrible and disgusting, right? Wouldn't you think that? That's what I would think. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie thing worked. What exactly did it do to the enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out? Oh, or their breath stinky? Yeah. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. Should be called secret pie, secret enemy pie. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job, what my role was in enemy pie. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day, a whole day, with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was all worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with that Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and I knocked on his door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. What do you think's going on here? It's part of Dad's plan? Them playing together, right? He said he'd need to play with him for a whole day and be nice doing it. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch, and after lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make his enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Look at their faces. It looks like they're definitely having a good time, an actual good time. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. Oh, wow. He threw it and it came right back to him. I'd never been able to do that before. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. Now, why might that be a problem? Do you remember? What's in his tree house? What did he post there at the beginning of the story? That might cause a little bit of a sticky situation between him and Jeremy. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't even have to let her in. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him in either. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. Oh, he wasn't being a very good enemy. What happened? Okay, I said, but hold on a minute. Why does he want Jeremy to hold on? He needs to take care of something first, right? I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came up to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. No way. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates, side by side. So that means 8 pieces, 3 plates, 3 slices, 3/8 of the pie. With big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream, he passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at that pie. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat the enemy pie. He was my friend now. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's a bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was now a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating the enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating. And neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a taste. Enemy pie was actually delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. That was one clever dad in that story, if you ask me. You guys get it, right? That by having to spend the whole day together and be nice to Jeremy, he learned that he wasn't so bad after all. And they had just gotten off to kind of a bit of a bad start, I guess. Things that could easily be fixed were. And now they were great friends. So sometimes even someone who might not seem like a friend at the beginning can turn out to be a best friend. You just have to give them a try. Do your best too, and do your part to make sure maybe you're not just being stubborn or maybe even a little jealous of something that they've done or someone that they're hanging out with. So always keep an open mind when it comes to friends, because it's always better to have more friends. That's what I think anyway. I hope you guys love that story, Enemy Pie. It's definitely one of my favorites. And I think having more friends than enemies is definitely a way to go. All right, we'll see you next time.